Good evening, and welcome back to Whodunit Hall. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm Edgeworth, the butler, your guide to the Master's extensive collection of mystery films. In our last visit, we took a look at Peter Ustinov's first outing as the great detective Hercule Poirot in Death on the Nile. Today, we're going to continue our look at Ustinov's work as Poirot as we move on to his second outing, Evil Under the Sun. Evil Under the Sun was originally published in 1941 and featured Poirot solving a murder while he is on holiday in Devon. However, the film version, released in 1982, changes the locale of the story to a resort on an island off the coast of the fictional country of Tirania. As is tradition with many film adaptations of Mrs. Christie's work, the film features an all-star cast including Roddy McDowall, James Mason, Diana Rigg, and Colin Blakely. Peter Ustinov is also joined by two of his fellow cast members from Death on the Nile, Maggie Smith and Jane Birkin, naturally playing all new roles in this particular film. When the original novel was released in 1941, it came under fire from critics who claimed that the solution bordered on the impossible and that audiences were being led around by the nose. This is not entirely an invalid complaint. However, I personally have a problem with the 1982 film version of this story because of other reasons. But I think it's best if I demonstrate what I mean. So with that, let us take a look at Evil Under the Sun. We have a rather grim opening as a woman dashes into the local police station reporting the discovery of a dead body on the moor.
Ruba, Alice, Mrs. I'd say she's been dead for no more than 2 hours. Say 4 o'clock at the outside for time of death.
We then have a rather jarring cut to London, where Poirot is visiting with the head of the London Trojan Insurance Company to receive payment for another successfully solved case. However, there is another matter to which the head of the company wishes to consult Poirot.
We have Sir Horace Blatt. He is seeking to insure it with us for £50,000. You are, of course, quite right. It's paste.
The question is, why should a millionaire industrialist perpetrate such an obvious fraud?
So you see, there is something of a mystery.
Rest assured, with Hercule Poirot, mysteries never last for long.
True, they usually only last 120 minutes. As it turns out, Sir Horace is on his yacht in the south of France, so after acquiring some additional funds, Poirot battles his penchant for seasickness and drops in on Sir Horace, played by Colin Blakely.
In contemplation of marriage. And frankly, $100,000 is a bit much to pay for 3 days fumbling on the high seas. So, 3 weeks ago, I went after her and demanded it back. She'd had the bloody thing copied, hadn't she? I happen to know. Within 3 days' time, she'd be down at Daphne's place for a little holiday. Daphne Castle! Yes, she was the mistress of the King of Tyrrhenia for years. Then, when he upped and married the present queen, he gave Daphne an old summer palace to keep it quiet. She's turned it into one of those exclusive la-di-da hotels where the knobs and nancies come to squawk at each other. I can't stand it myself, but she's good sort.
Making plans to head to Daphne Castle's resort by train and meeting Sir Horace there, Poirot begins his usual habit of observing others in the dining room of his hotel that evening. He first observes married couple Patrick and Christine Redfern, played by Nicholas Clay and Jane Birkin, who do not appear to be living in wedded bliss.
Patrick, really, what time for another drink? The steamer leaves at 11.
Oh, of course I have. If you have the baggage sent down, while I wait for the change.
Why do I always have to do everything?
And shortly after this, Poirot notices Redfern having a rendezvous with an unseen woman who is most definitely not his wife. It isn't exactly my place to tell tales out of school, as it were, but this kind of behavior is not all that uncommon amongst the upper classes. The Master, shortly before marrying his 9th ex-wife, used to have these sort of clandestine meetings all the time. And you can't imagine the embarrassment on one particular occasion when he went up and started kissing the hand of what he thought was his latest clandestine affair. It turned out to be the young lady's husband, the hand model. I'm honestly not certain who was more surprised, the Master when he discovered his mistake, or the young man in question, since the Master was able to kiss his hand for a full 5 minutes before the truth came out. We then go to Daphne Castle's resort, where Daphne herself, played by Maggie Smith, is starting the day and seeing to her guests, which include freelance writer Rex Brewster, played by Roddy McDowall, and New York theatrical producers Odell and Myra Gardner, played by James Mason and Sylvia Miles.
That'll be Arlena.
Arlena Stewart.
No, Arlena Marshall. She remarried a couple of months ago.
Oh, good God, darling, I didn't know she was coming. Oh, how marvelous.
Oh, isn't that the one that she walked out on after just 3 weeks? And your biggest hit in years.
Would either of you care
well, if you want to take into account the sheer number of people who do this sort of type of reviewing on the internet, then yes. Yes, it is. After Daphne greets the Redferns and are treated to their bickering, we cut to Poirot, who is waiting for the boat to the resort, and he encounters the aforementioned Arlena Marshall, played by Diana Rigg, her husband Kenneth, played by Dennis Quilley, and his daughter Linda, played by Emily Hone. As the group begins their journey to the island, Poirot learns of one of the strange customs of the Turanian people.
God's teeth!
Don't worry, darling. It's only the noonday gun. The noonday gun? Yes, it's fired every day at 12 o'clock.
As Poirot and the Marshalls arrive, we discover that the gardener's stay at the resort is not entirely coincidental.
What if the bitch refuses to do the show?
You lose all our backers, that's what, man. After all, we sold the show on her name.
Well, as I understand it, legendary Broadway producers Bialystok and Bloom managed to get around a similar problem.
So simple. Step one, we find the worst play in the world, a surefire plot.
As it turns out, Daphne has a history with Arlena herself.
Not that I could ever compete. Even in those days, she could always throw her legs up in the air, higher than any of us. And wider.
And so it appears we have another one of those wonderful Agatha Christie coincidences where everyone on the island has a reason to murder Arlena Marshall. So let's get on with the motive, shall we? First off, at the cocktail party that night, we get our first inkling as to what may turn the gardeners murderous.
We have a fabulous show for you.
Oh, it's a real humdinger, honey.
Well, it's very sweet of you, but I'm sort of retired, you know. This is my new audience.
The next day, Rex gets a few moments alone with Arlena, and we discover why he's been so keen to talk to her.
I was wondering if you've had a chance to read the proofs of the biography yet.
Oh, indeed I have, Rex. I simply couldn't put it down.
The days of my youth. But I've shoved all that behind me now, Rex, which is exactly what you're going to do with your lousy book.
I'm not going to sign that release, and that's final.
You're going to regret this, Arlena.
And in case you believe Linda wouldn't have a reason to commit murder,
I just wanted a chance. I don't seem to be having much fun.
Well, if it's fun you're looking for, darling, go play with the jellyfish.
So, 4 down, but let's take a break from all that and see what Poirot is up to.
You do not care for the aquatic sports or the sunbathing, madame.
I wish I could, but it don't go brown. Sort of resemble a casata. Pink skin, white blisters and green in the face.
At this point, Daphne appears and after glaring at Arlena, reports that Sir Horace is having difficulty with his yacht and won't arrive for another 24 hours. Shortly after this, Linda and Kenneth appear, just in time to see Arlena disappear around a rock in a rowboat with Patrick. Oh dear. Looks like we can add 2 more motives to the list. But there's still some time before Arlena is murdered, so let's take a look in on some of the other doings around the island. At lunch, Odell gives Arlena a copy of the script and she reads it while sunbathing later that day. Meanwhile, Poirot discovers Christine crying in the garden.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Poirot. I suffer from vertigo.
That night, Daphne and Kenneth have a discussion about Arlena. Kenneth isn't willing to see Arlena's manipulative behavior, but Daphne reveals that Arlena was the one who booked Patrick Redfern into the resort in the first place.
Even so. With me, a deal is a deal. I don't approve of quick marriage and easy divorce. Arlena is my wife. That's all there is to it.
Meanwhile, Arlena shot down the gardener's request to be in the play. Coupled with her walkout on their previous show, this means they have lost a considerable amount of money. And tensions continue to rise when Kenneth reveals he knows about Arlena booking Patrick into the resort, and Poirot overhears the Redferns arguing.
Jumping to the conclusion that I'm having an affair with her.
Leave me here alone. All day and go off with her. I'm the laughing stock of the whole hotel.
Of course you're not. You're being ridiculous. Arlena and I are just good friends, that's all.
Now, pay attention because I'm about to summarize what happens in the next few minutes rather quickly. The next morning, Christine invites Linda to join her at Gull Cove for sketching and swimming. Down at the beach, Poirot assists Arlena in launching a pedalo into the lagoon, and Arlena asks him not to reveal that she's gone. In the meantime, Odell has an idea on how to change Arlena's mind, but says he needs time to work out the details. In the lobby, Daphne and Linda have a chat, and Kenneth receives a letter which needs to be replied to immediately. Daphne heads off for a walk to the lighthouse before her 11:30 staff meeting. During her walk, she spots Arlena sunning herself on the beach. Rex Brewster takes a pedalo of his own out on the waves. Patrick prepares to take a speedboat out, but is intercepted by Myra, who insists on tagging along. Christine asks Linda what time it is and dashes off when Linda reports that it's 11:55, as Christine is playing tennis at 12:30. In the speedboat, Patrick and Myra spot Sir Horace's yacht arriving. The noonday gun goes off. Patrick and Myra locate Arlena, but... And so Poirot becomes involved in the case.
But consider, just think what everyone will say if they were to discover that you were here ahead of the police and failed to solve the crime. I bet it hongs something rotten in there.
Only of the breath of the sea.
But it turns out operative motives isn't over quite yet, as Sir Horace Blatt has his own connection to Arlena.
You remember the false diamond I left in your possession? Yes. Well then, how did I happen to find it once again on the beach, near the dead woman? All I did was tell her that she couldn't make a monkey out of me, and I threw that bit of glass at her. Look, if I'd killed her, my crew would have seen me, wouldn't they? They were all on deck, bloody watching. They're not averse to clocking a decent bit of comfort to my lads.
From Sir Horace and Patrick, Poirot turns his attention to Kenneth Marshall, who claims to have been typing his reply to the letter. When Poirot doesn't believe him, Daphne turns up, claiming she saw Kenneth hard at work on the letter at the time of the murder.
Madame, you cannot see in the mirror someone seated at the desk. It's not me that is hiding, it is you who are lying.
Oh, but don't think Poirot is done with Daphne yet, as she has her own very good motive for murder.
But there is a certain tenderness between you and Monsieur Marshall. Otherwise, why take that absurd risk of trying to protect him just now?
What if there is? What does it matter?
It matters because Madame Arlena was in the way.
It was Sir Horace Blatt. When I came back here from my walk at about 11:15, I saw him down on the beach. He was jumping up and down and screaming blue murder at Arlena. I've never seen a fellow in such a fury.
I already have done, Madame. And he is exonerated by his crew. All the same, his story does confirm yours. Without knowing it, you have corroborated your own alibi. Bravo, Madame.
As Poirot moves on to his next interview, he hears Christine and Patrick arguing again and catches Christine as she storms out of her room. Poirot takes the opportunity to question Christine about her whereabouts that morning.
I was there until 12 o'clock. I went off for my tennis game.
You had work.
No, I didn't.
Well, then how did you know it was precisely 12 o'clock?
Because when I climbed to the top of the cliff and was waving to Linda, who'd gone for a swim, that awful gun went off. The one they fire at noon every day.
What did you do then, Madame?
Well, I was late, you see, for my tennis, which was fixed for 12:30, so I simply tore back to the hotel as fast as I could and changed into my tennis things. And then I went to the court and met the others, Mr. Marshall, Mrs. Castle, and Mr. Gardner.
From there, Poirot asks Linda about her morning with Christine.
When did she leave you?
5 to 12.
How can you be so sure?
Because she asked me. What time is it, dear? 5 to 12. Lord, I was flying. I'm playing tennis at 12:30.
She got into a fearful panic about being late for tennis and rushed off back to the hotel. I remember I was halfway down the beach when Christine called after me.
Don't forget your bathing cap.
I'd forgotten my bathing cap, so I had to come back and put it on. What a bore.
After telling her story, Linda reveals that she overheard Arlena arguing with Rex Brewster the day before and is, in her opinion, the murderer. Poirot goes in search of Rex and finds him revising the end of his book.
It was perfectly possible for you to have watched the Horace Blatt's boat leave and then to have pedaled into Ladder Bay, there to find the unsuspecting Arlena asleep, and then you strangled her.
Monsieur Poirot, are you aware that it would take nearly 2 hours to paddle around the island from Ladder Bay to Gull Bay? At 12 o'clock precisely, as that boring old gun went off, I pedaled into Gull Bay. Linda was there, swimming. In fact, I nearly hit her. She was splashing around like a deaf seal. And so you see, darling, I simply could not have killed Arlena. Monsieur, if you are so anxious to find a murderer, why don't you find out who tried to murder me? After I'd been left by that lazy little cow Linda to rupture myself, I pedaled on. And about 10 minutes later, a bottle came whizzing over the cliff and smacked down in the water right next to me. The damn thing missed my head by inches. I looked up. There was nobody around.
When When Poirot states he doesn't believe Rex's story because Linda denied seeing anyone at Gull Cove at noon, Rex confronts Linda, who, after some prodding from her father, admits she did in fact see Rex at Gull Cove, thus confirming his alibi. Now we turn our attention to Odell Gardner, who has a very shocking revelation for Poirot.
Consequently, as I was guilelessly reading my book, there was no gardener to come trotting by, respectfully touching his forelock and registering the time on his grandfather's turnip watch. In short, Monsieur Poirot, I don't have the ghost of an alibi.
However, despite what he believes, Odell does, in fact, have an alibi.
Well, at 11:30, I was having my staff meeting, giving the hired help a pleasing stream of the old rancid, when I just happened to look out of the window and there was Odell in the garden reading a book. He stayed there throughout the entire meeting. I'm positive of it. What's the matter? Have I said something?
You said a great deal, madame.
Oh, I see what you mean. You mean nobody did it?
And yet, we still have a body, madame.
Deciding to clear his head and check some of the facts he's been given, Poirot times himself crossing the island and returning to the hotel. As he does so, he encounters Patrick in the lobby.
It's funny to think, if Giuseppe Verdi had been an Englishman, his name would have been Joe Green.
Yes, I suppose it would, yes.
And then he poses 2 questions to the group at large during cocktails.
First of all, did anybody here throw a bottle into the sea this morning? No? Secondly, did any of you take a bath at 12:15 today, an odd time for a douche? How remarkable. A bath which nobody admits having taken, and a bottle which flies by itself.
That night, Poirot peruses a policy from the insurance company and later goes downstairs to look at the guest register. Quite honestly, while all this is very interesting, I'm certain I'm not the only one growing weary of Poirot's lack of progress.
Madame, there is nothing like a good night's rest to clear the little grace in you. Kindly ask all our friends to foregather in the lounge after they've finished their petit déjeuner, when all will be revealed.
What?
You mean you know?
Well, give us a few clues.
All right. I wish you to consider very carefully a bathing cap, a bath, a bottle, a wristwatch, the diamond, the noonday gun, the breadth of the sea, and the height of the cliff. From that, you should be able to solve it yourselves.
And so, as we leave Poirot to his breakfast, I'm afraid I too must leave you all, much like Sir Horace and Daphne, in suspense. Let me make myself clear from the outset. Evil Under the Sun is not a bad mystery. It's quite intriguing and well constructed. The problem lies in the fact that the film as a whole is, quite honestly, rather dull. The cast of characters is nowhere near as colourful as the cast of Death on the Nile, nor containing as much star power. Peter Ustinov is excellent as Poirot as always, and Roddy McDowall and James Mason stick out as memorable performances in their turns. However, the rest of the cast turn in performances which range from forgettable, as in the case of Dennis Quilley and Jane Birkin, to ridiculously over the top, as exemplified by Nicholas Clay, Sylvia Miles, and Diana Rigg as Arlena Marshall. As a result, the film feels overlong and full of padding, despite being only a little under 2 hours long. Which is a tragedy because a murder this intricate deserves a much better paced film. If you're a fan of the works of Agatha Christie and enjoyed Peter Ustinov's turn as Poirot in Death on the Nile, then yes, I would go ahead and give this film a viewing. If not, however, quite honestly, you could probably find better adaptations elsewhere. And with that, I'm afraid I must draw this visit to a close. The Master is preparing for a holiday of his own, and I need to double-check his packing in order to make sure he doesn't run into any problems with airport security. Again, we're running out of money in the account we have set aside for bail. In any event, I hope you'll join me again for another visit to the Master's extensive collection here at Whodunit Hall. Sir, I'm coming to assist you. Let me remind you, security said the spiked leather kitchen apron is not allowed in your carry-on.